Welcome to the latest episode of First Word in Sport. I am one of your co-hosts, Luke Payton. This is co-host James Roberts. James, how has your week been?
All good, Luke. Apart from the cricket, just been watching the final session of the day 2 of the Ashes in Brisbane, and England are way behind in the game.
It's certainly been a pretty ugly day for England. We'll touch on that in a bit more detail a little bit later. For now, let's talk about Premier League football. It was a big set of games over Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night this week. There's some pretty crazy games. Manchester City winning 5-4 away at Fulham. We had Newcastle and Spurs 2-2. Leeds beating Chelsea 3-1. Brighton Villa 4-3 to Villa. Arsenal beat Brentford 2-0. So plenty of things to talk about. I think let's start talking about Arsenal and their title bid and where they're at.
A comfortable 2-0 victory, as you said, against Brentford on Tuesday night. I think they would have been delighted when they saw the Brentford team news with no Thiago and no Jordan Henderson. I'm not a massive Jordan Henderson fan, but I do appreciate his contribution to Brentford this season. It was comfortable 2-0. They keep ahead of everyone in the Premier League at arm's length. However, if Raya doesn't make that save at 1-0, which is a brilliant save, and touch it onto crossbar, it could be very different. But yeah, Arsenal are looking strong. They're not playing great, but do they really need to at the moment? Not really.
I think what's interesting for me, I mean, you touched on the Raya save. It's just fine margins in these games, and you can see it extrapolated over the other games this midweek. If that game goes 1-1, I think it's a very different game. Arsenal may have got a little bit nervous. That didn't happen. I think they have a commanding lead still, although I think this is going to be a big weekend for them. They're obviously away at Villa, tricky game, and Manchester City on paper have Sunderland at home. There's a possibility that Manchester City could get that lead down to just 2 points, which really is game on given how dominant Arsenal were looking, at times in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely a 2-horse race now. Liverpool aren't in it, haven't been in it for a couple of weeks. Chelsea had a poor result in midweek against Leeds, and I go back to, I think Casado's a massive loss for them on midweek and again on the weekend and next weekend with his 3-match ban for his pretty poor tackle in the game against Arsenal last weekend. Arsenal, yeah, what's Arteta complaining about? I know he's your favourite manager at the moment and complaining, but complaining about fixture lists again. What's your view on that?
So I have issues with Arteta, I think, and I've had them for a while. I've talked about it on Twitter, certainly before. I think he obviously loves to moan and complain, and I don't think it helps Arsenal with the way that he does things. I don't see to whose benefit it is to complain about fixture list congestion here. Every team has a whole series of very tricky fixture lists coming up. It's pretty relentless schedule from midweek to weekend to midweek. Obviously, for Arsenal, they've got Champions League, and then they've also got Carabao Cup, which some teams don't have. But that's just a function of being successful. What Arsenal do have is a squad of players that has cost almost £1 billion to assemble. They've had these incredible youngsters come into the squad as well. They have a squad where everyone talks about how they have 2 players for every position, and depth can't be an excuse anymore, right? He isn't in an unenviable, he's in a position where everyone else would love to be as a manager, right? You compare him to Unai Emery, who he's up against at the weekend. Emery was having to, sell all sorts of different players and not be able to sign anyone in the summer, squad taking a hit. Everyone would love to be in the position that Arteta's in, and yet all we hear is him moaning about fixture list chaos. Villa have been away at Brighton on Wednesday, exactly the same day as Arsenal played this week. Why are you moaning, Arteta? Seriously, it drives me mad. I think it has such negative connotations for his team. There's too much negativity around him with these types of incidents.
I certainly think it affected him last year when he was completely moaning about everything all the time and trying. It's almost like he's trying to take the pressure off the players in a funny sort of way. But I think it actually is a detriment to the players, and it's almost like a mindset is everyone against us all the time. It's not fair on us. We have to play this. They constantly play their first team all the time, really. Declan Rice played in a League Cup game against Port Vale earlier in the season. Why? They bought Nordgaard to be that replacement. They've got enough quality not to some games to play, especially in the Carabao Cup. They don't need to play, but it's probably because they haven't won it since 1993. It's probably why they're trying to win, and he needs a trophy. But yeah, he moans a lot, Arteta.
Well, I think you just touched on it there, is you've got key players like Declan Rice, who has had a couple of substitutes appearances. But apart from that, and I was looking at it even yesterday, is he has played almost non-stop football. And then you wondered why he picks up a potential calf strain. It drives me crazy. They don't need to have their first team, their best team, out every single game. It's a squad game, and he needs to start actually using his squad that he's put together at great expense a little bit more. Oh, it drives me mad.
I did see, though, it was interesting looking at the team news from across the Premier League in a week. There was a lot of changes, and a fair few managers were changing 3 or 4 players because they need to. They need to reduce the load of players in case of, protecting them so they don't get injured for the important games later on in the season. They just, Brentford changed their team, Villa changed their team. There's only 3 or 4 players here. Arsenal don't always do it, and it could come back to bite them later in the season.
Well, I think you touched on Brentford. So Brentford is a really good example, I think, where they obviously have Spurs this weekend. Is that in all likelihood you're going to lose to Arsenal. Okay, so if you're going to rest a couple of players, it's not a bad game to actually rest them for. Brighton rested, or certainly, I don't know, rested is the right word, but they were missing Ayari and Rutter. Welbeck started on the bench. Villa had Tielemans on the bench. He's obviously just coming back from injury, and Villa had other options. I do find it interesting. And we talk about Pep as well. Pep's been very reluctant to mix things around. And as I say, you'd love to always play your best team, but that's just not the realities of Premier League football anymore. Let's touch on Manchester City and Chelsea. I mean, that Manchester City game was another wild one. I don't know how much you saw of it, but they were 5-1 up before they were hanging on so grimly at the end at 5-4. Fulham had chances, through King, one cleared off the line. They also had a pretty good penalty shout late on. It's incredible to watch Man City fall apart in these situations.
I didn't get to see it. I only saw the highlights on Wednesday. There was some stat I saw that if they have a certain amount of percentage of the ball, Man City, or less, the amount of goals that they concede is quite frightening. They still haven't found the issue how to play without Rodri in that midfield. They don't have a real player that can do that holding role. He doesn't seem to trust Gonzalez. Reinders obviously isn't that holding player. He's a more box-to-box player. Yeah, conceding 4 at Fulham after conceding 2 at home to Leeds is 6 in 2 games. It isn't great at all for City. His 100th goal is a frightening stat, how good that lad is. And that assist is brilliant as well, to be fair to him. They needed to win.
I think the thing with City, they've been a little bit unlucky in that Fulham game, and that Fulham have taken their chances a little bit. That all four have been okay finishes, but and by the way, I think he trusts Gonzalez, but he's just not nearly as good as what Rodri is. But he is rolling out the same defense time and time again at the moment, and it's just not really working. I mean, obviously throughout his tenure at City, there's been some pretty ropey defenses in there, and I used to attribute some of that to Ederson. But it's clearly not just an Ederson issue. And by the way, Donnarumma, I think he's probably the best shot-stopping goalkeeper in the world, bar none. He is absolutely horrendous at dealing with crosses, and has been since I've ever seen him. It was always the question mark against him, and teams are beginning to show him up a little bit for that particular weakness. He's been a little bit unlucky at times. I think the Bournemouth goal stood out. I think he was clearly fouled there, but there's quite a few games now where his flapping has cost City, and I don't think City are in a position where if they want to get involved with this title race, that they can be having a Donnarumma flapping at every corner and cross.
Yeah, surprisingly, 6'6", and he can dominate, and he can't catch a cold at times. Yeah, it's odd. Maybe that's why he left PSG, along being his passing ability. But
let's touch on Chelsea.
Trafford isn't going to get back in that side anyway. But yeah, they are conceding way too many goals to be mount a title charge if they carry on like that. You can't keep them conceding 2 or 4 goals a game, kind of thing. It's ridiculous.
Well, and it's not against great teams. If you're conceding 4 goals to Arsenal, you might go, oh, okay, but they're not. It's Fulham and Leeds.
Yeah.
Let's touch on Chelsea. Obviously, they've had a shocking result away at Leeds. I think the shocker isn't just the result; it was actually the performance as well. They had made a few changes before the game. Their inconsistency, it's there for all to see. It's just not good.
Yeah, I think they're a young team. They lack a lot of leadership, I think. They don't have anyone who can take the game by the ball or the horns and go, we need to slow the game down here. We need to take 10, 15 minutes out of it, quieten the crowd down. They don't have that experience. They're very inexperienced at the back, especially. No Caicedo. They look half the side without him. I don't like Enzo playing in that double pivot at all. I think he's a much better player when he plays it as a 10 behind the striker. They have that issue coming up now when Palmer is now back fit. Where do they play him and Palmer in the side? I'd imagine they might have to shift Palmer out to the right and play Enzo at the 10, and then go and play Reece James, who obviously didn't play against Leeds, maybe because of injury concerns, can't play 3 games in 6 days, which is understandable with his body. They played Santos. Yeah, they're Jekyll and Hyde. Can't read them. They're very hard to read. And it's still got question marks over the Maresca at times. They played well against Arsenal as well. That's the thing. Even with 10 men, they were pretty impressive against Arsenal. Yeah, it's a good result for them. Great result for Leeds.
I would agree with all of that, to be honest. I think it's probably more so than any other team in the league to get a read on Chelsea and how good or otherwise they are. I think it's very difficult. Let's touch on our favourite trio, Amorim, Frank and Slot. Amorim obviously oversaw a masterful 1-1 draw with West Ham last night. Any thoughts on that game?
Poor game of football. Really poor game of football. United did absolutely nothing in the first half. After coming off a decent result against Palace, the performance was bad. And that's 3 bad performances in a row for Man United. Amorim doesn't do it for me. They don't have midweek games. What's he doing on the training pitch when he's got all this time to prepare his team to play It's the same thing every single time. He doesn't change at all. He always plays the 3-4-2-1 formation, regardless of who he's playing against or whether they've got 10 men or they're playing one up front. It's a bad result, and West Ham could have won it at the end if Bowen had put that ball across. It's a shocker for Amorim there.
I think what amazes me with Amorim is how poor his in-play management is. So we saw against Everton last week when obviously Everton had gone down to 10 men early in that game relatively. And it took him, he was unwilling to sacrifice his 3-man defence. And just the inability to make the right changes. So even last night, he obviously brought on Ugarte. Every change seems to be a like-for-like change. So obviously he started Heaven yesterday, looked very poor, to be honest.
Out of his depth last night.
Yeah, I think so. And then
he's a young kid, but he's not ready for the Premier League at all.
Well, I don't really quite know why he started, because the one thing sort of touched on there was that Man United don't have the same number of games as other teams. They don't have all these, European games or Carabao Cup games. So I'm surprised that the load on the players is such that they need to be worried about that. And they've also got Martinez coming back, which will help. I know Maguire's injured, but I'm surprised that they were having to bring in Heaven for that particular game.
They can't play Martinez and Shaw together. So if they bring out Martinez, well, it'd be hilarious. But surely it can't be that silly. They both play that left-sided centre-back role. And Shaw's actually not been that bad this season. I don't mind him there, because he can't get up and down that left-back role or the left wing-back role that they play. And with Dorgo or Dado or whoever they want to play there, Diallo, Ahmad, even. So what, they're going to drop Shaw for Martinez? But they have no... they're a mess.
You need more physical presence in the back three than playing Shaw and Martinez. I mean, you could play Martinez in the middle, probably at the back, but again, you can't have a defender that short defensively in the middle of the three, I don't think.
You get bullied.
I'll let you talk about Slot.
Do I have to? I'm getting quite bored of it. The performance on Wednesday night was downright terrible. Really, really poor. Sunderland are a decent outfit. Let's not get... they played well. They've got a structure. Liverpool, poor. I don't know what the idea was. He only changed Robertson, but Robertson played that left-back role differently to Kirkers on Sunday against West Ham, when Kirkers was the overlap on the left-hand side and Gakpo played closer to Isak. And then on Wednesday night, Robertson was doing the underlapping and coming into midfield. And that was at the back. Going forward, they were terrible, really bad. They didn't have a shot on target in the second half. Got lucky with the goal, very lucky. And then Chiesa outrageous piece of defending and understanding of the game to stop Sunderland scoring the winner. Yeah, it's a mess at Liverpool. I don't think Slot can turn it around. I actually don't think the club think he can turn it around. I think some of the senior players have definitely confused, given up. Look at the performances of Van Dijk. Everyone talks about he's lost his leg, blah, blah. He's just not even interested at the moment. He's not concentrating. He gets no protection from the midfield anyway, but you still expect better from him. I think they're just waiting for the guy that they want in charge. I haven't heard anything. I would like Inzaghi or Glasner. But yeah, I don't see Slot changing anything to help Liverpool go up the table at all.
How are those two new big contracts that you gave to Salah and Van Dijk looking, James?
Fine. I can see. I hear all about them. oh, Salah's not the same player. He hasn't been playing well, but he's been asked to play as a natural right winger. And that's just absolute nonsense. That's not his game. The dropping of him against West Ham and Sunderland, I think, was from slot was I'm in charge here, don't question me behind the scenes. But then he played his Gakpo, who's been downright terrible, like really bad. And thankfully, he got hauled off at half time against Sunderland because that was a terrible performance by him. Gravenberch's been absolutely garbage. McAllister hasn't recovered from his surgery in the summer. Yeah, it's a mess. I wouldn't be surprised. If they lose away at Leeds tomorrow, he's definitely gone. They might wait till after the Inter game and then get someone in for the Brighton, but I can't see him lasting anyway before Christmas at all. I'd be surprised if he stays in the job, to be honest.
The other member of the trio is Frank. Obviously, Tottenham drew 2-2 away at Newcastle.
Yeah, that's not a bad result in the grand scheme of things, 2-2, considering how Newcastle took the lead from Gordon penalty, which will come on to referees in a bit. It's a great finish from Romero. Don't know what he's doing up there, but it's a great overhead kick there. They've got a point. Yeah, there's still massive issues. They don't offer anything going forward at all. Under at Tottenham there. Brentford at home tomorrow. If they lose that, there's going to be real danger. But maybe the only thing that's keeping him in the job is they only appointed him in the summer. And it's a big decision to go, again, we got it wrong. We're going to change tack again, kind of thing. So it'll be 3 managers in 18 months there? No, 24 months, sorry, yeah. But
I think they were pretty poor for most of that game against Newcastle. Obviously, there was a contentious penalty, but Newcastle were good value for their lead, I thought. Obviously, Romero scored a couple of goals at the end, and a point is probably more than Spurs deserved. I think they were, as you touched on, they were so lacking in ideas going forward again. I don't quite know any quick and easy fixes for Frank. I would say they do have quite a few injuries, obviously, with your Madisons and Kulusevskis. Solanke's out. So obviously that doesn't help. And that may well end up giving him a little bit of time. But one thing a big Spurs friend and I was talking about this week was that actually, the Tottenham players and Frank were complaining about the Tottenham fans and the sort of disconnect between the fans and the players. And what we were talking about was Daniel Levy not being there anymore and being almost a figure who the fans could vent at. Obviously, he's no longer there now. And the most obvious place for the fans to vent their anger is actually at Frank and the players. And I think what you're seeing is a set of fans who have just had enough of watching terrible, terrible football, game in, game out. I think these teams forget at times that it is an entertainment business. And, you've got fans traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles, spending small fortunes to go and watch a team who, at times this season, have hardly had a shot on goal. It's been absolutely woeful from Spurs. And I think that's why Frank would potentially get a shorter leash than some people might think.
Yeah, they were terrible against Chelsea at home when they had an XG of 0.01. I think against Fulham as well, wasn't it? It was like 0.01 up to half time as well or something. That's not a good sign at all. I actually met a Tottenham fan on Tuesday night at a work event, and he was saying something similar. I'd rather have Ange back, because at least you know what you got. You got chaos football, and it was enjoyable. Not this Frank business when they don't actually know, as we've discussed, what formation they're playing, what the tactics are the players confused? Yeah, it could be a very long season for Tottenham.
Okay, I think that's... one thing I did want to touch on quickly was some of the refereeing in midweek. We had the farcical penalty that Newcastle got against Tottenham for the holding in the box. Thoughts, James? I know you love the VAR referees.
I don't know what to say, really, apart from how can 3 referees get that wrong? Well, the referee saw it in real time and didn't give the penalty. So VAR look at it, the assistant VAR look at it, call the referee over who looks at it, and they all make the same decision. Not surprised, they all back each other up, which we always know, and go, that's a penalty. Okay, in the laws of the game, it probably is a penalty, but every corner is holding, pushing, pulling going on. How can you suddenly decide in that bigger game or any Premier League game or any game of football to give that as a penalty? And you talked about earlier how goals or certain things change games. Yeah, shocking. Absolutely shocking. I'd love to hear the audio of that, by the way. I really would.
I think it always comes down to the consistency or lack of consistency. You see those situations happen, 10 times every weekend at least, and they don't get given. And then suddenly you have a game like that where it does get given. I think the most disappointing aspect to it is the number of decisions you see which are incorrect, which they keep or stay with because the decision on the pitch was a certain way. They've gone and overturned that decision to make, to give a penalty. I find it just bewildering, to be honest. And they've opened the can of worms in terms of all the contact around goalkeepers on corners and set pieces. And I find it quite strange in that it so disproportionately favours the attacking team. They can get away with absolutely all sorts with seemingly little consequence, and yet defenders are trying to stop some of the blocking and everything else, and it's a penalty. The punishment doesn't really fit the crime necessarily at times. It's maddening. I think the other one.
Then you got into the Wolves Forest game that took 5 minutes to decide something should take 5 seconds. The guy was clearly offside, interfering with the goalkeeper, Sam Johnston, in goal. Just not a goal. Just like, why does it have to have constant 5 minutes of just talking to each other? It's just ridiculous. Why they can't make a decision like that that's simple.
But again, I think that's a symptom of previous weeks where they've had so many discussion points about goals scored with players who are offside in sight lines of the goalkeeper. I mean, there was one at the Villa Wolves last weekend where Wolves scored and the player was basically touching Martinez. It was rightly disallowed, but they actually came to that decision quite quickly. I don't think it does the referees or VAR any favours when it takes 5 minutes for something that is so obvious as that Forest game. Just doesn't help anyone.
2 things on VAR. I saw that FIFA for next year's World Cup, which will come on in a minute, they are going to use VAR for corners, whether they are corners from next year's World Cup, which would have helped Brighton Aston Villa game.
I was going to say, does that mean Brighton's first goal doesn't stand?
Yeah, so they're going to bring that in. They've announced that overnight. And secondly, what was my other point of VAR? Oh, come on, I can't remember at the moment. But yeah, that was the biggest thing I've seen on VAR recently in the last 24 hours is that from FIFA have announced that for next year's World Cup.
Well, let's talking about World Cup. So World Cup draw is today at 5 p.m. Obviously,
GMT.
Obviously, not loads will happen. It's not that exciting, but I think the most interesting part is that the big 4 teams, so Spain, Argentina, France, and England, they've changed it now so that they're seeded and they can't actually meet each other until the semi-finals.
Yeah, that's a good change. I think you want the best teams to be in the later stages, of the competition, and reward them for their qualifying and how they are in the world rankings. I think it's a good change, considering there's going to be 48 teams in the World Cup next year. I am looking forward to watching England versus Curacao at 1 o'clock in the morning from New York. It'll be another Harry Kane 5 or 6 goals to peddling his stats.
All right, I think that's enough football for now. Let's have a look through other sports. We'll come on to the Ashes at the end of this segment. Snooker UK Championships continues. Watched a bit of Zintong yesterday, crash out. Some of his shots, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there was a lot of questionable stuff in there for a player who has the history that he has.
That pinky miss was closer to the middle pocket than the corner pocket.
I mean, honestly, I find it extraordinary. But obviously, Ronnie out.
No surprise.
I mean, you just never know what you're going to get with Ronnie, do you?
No.
There was a bit of rugby. Talk to me about how pleased you are with the length of ban in terms of South Africa.
It's about getting only 12 weeks. Nonsense. Should be minimum 26.
I mean, it is crazy in terms of the message it sends to rugby generally that something as serious eye gouging doesn't warrant something a bit more serious.
Well, the entry point is 18 weeks. And then because he hasn't got a red card in 140 internationals, how has that never got a red card? Because he's one of the most physical players ever to play the sport. Yeah, 12, and then reduced to 12 by 6 weeks to 12. So he's now got 12 weeks off over Christmas and New Year to sit on the beach in Cape Town, Camps Bay, and enjoy himself and not have any repercussions. Alex Mann, the Welsh flanker, could have lost an eye. It's just a no-no in any sport, let alone rugby. It's pretty poor from the authorities only giving him a 12-week ban, in my view. Lucky boy. Going on to rugby, there's some Challenge Cup, European Challenge Cup this weekend. A couple of games of interest, but Bath play Munster tomorrow night. Northampton play Po on Sunday afternoon. That's about it on the rugby scene.
Well,
apart from
Rugby World Cup draw happened this week.
Yeah, the Rugby World Cup draw happened in Australia on Wednesday morning. There are now 6 groups of 4, so 24 teams, an increase of teams again. No surprise, they want more games, more money involved back into the sport. The big takeout from that was in Group A, Australia, the hosts have been drawn against New Zealand, and I expect that to be the first game of the World Cup in October 2027. Ireland have got Scotland again in their group, and England have got Wales in their group. Hopefully it won't happen again, England losing to Wales like they did in 2015 at Twickenham. The big thing for Ireland and England is that they're on the opposite side of the draw of South Africa, France, and New Zealand if they win their groups, respectively. So they don't have to play any of the other big 3, which is a big advantage. So you could have a New Zealand-South Africa quarter-final if the rankings went to form, which sometimes it always doesn't, but in rugby more often it does. England would play Australia in quarter-finals, and Ireland would play Argentina to try and actually get into the semi-finals for the first time. But don't hold your breath, the Irish. They're as bad as other teams are bottling things. This Irish Rugby Union team, yes. But anyway, there's an extra round of games as well, so there's the last 16 as well.
It just seems an absolute nonsense to introduce so many new teams that will result in so many lopsided games. I don't really see how that. Obviously, you have the financial benefits, but I don't really see how that helps rugby as a spectacle.
You're not looking forward to watching New Zealand versus Hong Kong?
So there was some NFL last night, Thursday night match. We had Dallas at the Lions. Detroit won 44-30. It was a relatively close game at points. I think Dallas had got overcome a bit of a deficit to get back to within 3 points at one stage. The key really to the game was turnovers by Dallas. Detroit also got quite a bit of pressure on Prescott. You see, it was good. It was a good win for Detroit. Their season. It's not a case their season hasn't started, but they certainly haven't looked as convincing as they can do. Gibbs obviously scored another 3 touchdowns. Brown was back for them from injury. I guess the most interesting thing, certainly from a fantasy NFL point of view, was that Lamb went off with a concussion. So there must be a fair chance he misses next week, given he's one of the top wide receivers in the game. There are consequences to that. NBA, Oklahoma City Thunder continue on their incredible run, 21-1 now. Let's talk cricket and Ashes.
Shocking day for England today. Really bad day. I was having this discussion with you and a mate of ours yesterday. I said that 330 was well below par on that pitch. They're 44 behind as we record this now. Australia 6 down, 6. Australia 44 ahead with 6 wickets down in the first innings. First, let's get out way. Joe Root, fantastic, getting 130 odd not out. First 100 in Australia. Test match 100, number 40. It's pretty impressive, let's be honest. It's a ridiculous record. And finally, the Australians might have to give him some sort of recognition, because it's scary how good Root can be, and his record stands up to the best in the game ever, bar Bradman, obviously. He's a complete outlier. But England bowling today was pretty average. It was barring Arch and Atkinson, who bowled well. They didn't bowl great, but Carson Stokes bowled really poorly. They were bowling 2 bad balls and over, not 1, when he can release pressure or anything like that. They were going to 8s and 9s and over. It's not good enough. They're way behind in this game. And as I said last week, I can easily see 2-0. And then with Cummins back and Archer potentially missing Adelaide, Woods definitely out of Adelaide, where can you see an England victory coming from?
Well, I think something that isn't talked about enough was how poorly England bowled in that first test in the second innings. So the bowlers did well in that first innings. Anytime a team gets the highest score in the fourth innings to win a game, I think you probably have to look at, obviously you could look at the batsmen, but I think you also have to look at the bowlers a little bit, unless the pitch gets incredibly flat. I'm not sure that was the case in that first test. I just think England bowled really poorly. They bowled the wrong lengths and head went crazy. Now, fast forward to this test. That first session today, I'm not sure England have got it more wrong in many sessions from a bowling point of view. They bowled 4 balls in the entire session that would have hit the stumps. You're basically taking out of play any bowled, any LBW, and I find it absolutely, it's incredible that you can bowl so much short rubbish that kept getting slapped and slapped and slapped, and they were willing to play their shots, and they, the field placing was poor. It just seemed brainless cricket.
But look, when Smith came into bat, they suddenly bowled to his body and had a leg slip in him, trying to get him that little shove around the corner out. Why are they not bowling fist stumped him for the first 20 or 30 balls of his innings, and just bowl there with 2 slips in a gully and just bowl a relentless line and length to him? And he will nick off. He just let him get his eye in and easy runs and gets him off to a decent start. And suddenly, before you know it, he's on 40 off 60 balls and the pressure's off him. And he can bat. And he took a worldie from Jack to get him out. But yeah, the tactics there.
Well, I think the one thing I would say is I think the Aussies have been much better at creating moments in this test, in this series, to be honest, than England have. So if you look at Carey's catch in the first innings, unbelievable. Even the catch to get rid of Archer today was unbelievable. the direct hit run out of Stokes. England dropped head this morning. Not a difficult catch. Absolute, these are the moments you have to take if you're going to win test matches and be competitive. You saw the drop from Duckett of Carey, which looks, pretty costly now. That is not a difficult catch. I've got the best hand you've ever seen, James, but that's neither here nor there. That's not a difficult catch. That's a looping sort of almost slip catch. It was just not a difficult catch, and you've got to you have to take those catches in these types of games.
Yeah, but I go back to it. England's batting yesterday I thought was pretty poor. I know Duckett good ball. Pope paid an airy fairy shot, force ball. You're 5 for 2. To be fair to Crawley, he batted well and he got 70. 70s don't win you test matches, let alone test series. You have to make a big one. He got out playing a shot that was just a nothing shot. Like, Root, obviously, then. Let's move on to the captain quickly. Let's ignore the batsman at number 5. The new 5 captain, will come back to him in a second. Stokes, yeah, brain fade. At least he didn't run out Root, ran himself out. Smith got a good nut. But going back to Harry Brook, what was that innings all about yesterday? Ramping ball 4 or 5, lucky not to be stumped. And then Australia had been waiting for Stark to come on to bowl under floodlights midway through the second session. He doesn't even take a look. Stark bowls the ball outside off stump. His body position's in the wrong way. He waits on the back foot and he nicks it to Smith at second slip. Why are we just not seeing Stark off? Why are we not just saying to them, right, you can bowl 4 or 5 overs, we're going to score no runs, and you can go back to your mark and you carry on bowling until we grind you into the dirt, knowing full well we'll take runs off the other end with Bolland, Green, and whoever they want to bowl, Nessa. But no, Harry Brook, big wild swipe. Suddenly, you're losing 2-3 quick wickets. Bat properly, Harry Brook, for a change. Just bat properly. Read the situation to bat. It's winding you up. We know how good a player he is, but please, sometimes just take that rein in, bat properly.
Right, so we've obviously had some back and forth on this particular issue and just the shot selection from England generally. And, I agree with some of it. I don't think you can criticise a Crawley for getting out, playing a pull shot. He's in. He's had a lot of success in that innings. He's confident. And you know what? Sometimes you get out. I don't think it was necessarily a poor choice of shot. It's a shot he plays well normally. And so I think that's just one of those things that happens. I think let's come back to Brook because it is sort of elephant in the room a little bit in that I think England, you have to be really careful when you say to players, just rein it in a little bit. Make sure, see off this bowl or, England is full of players over the years who have been super talented, who England have tried to mould into a particular type of player, right? We know Harry Brook is an absolute genius, okay? His record, even after yesterday, I think he averages, 57, 58 with a strike rate of 87. I mean, you tell me, James, has any player done that before in Test match cricket?
No, not that. But my point is,
okay, right, that's the correct answer. No. Okay, so we're talking about a potentially generational type player, right? Who's had success in a certain way. I don't think that he benefits from being told to play in a certain way. He has a freedom to express himself, and just the way he bats. It was not a great ball from Stark, right? It was wide. It was relatively full, right? He had been in a little while, and he thought it was there to be hit. Fine, he's nicked it. But I love the fact that he isn't willing to compromise on how he wants to play cricket. I think we have seen with the batsman who came in at number 6, Ben Stokes, he looks a shadow of himself since he's tried to turn himself into a proper test match cricketer, right? You see him block the ball, and he has looked abysmal with a bat relative to his talent in the last even 3-4 years. Yes, he's had some good innings here and there, but he always looks best when he is at his attacking best. And I just want to make sure that, I think from an England perspective, is you take the rough with the smooth with Brook. Is, if you suddenly tell him, oh, you can't play this shot, you can't play that shot, I worry that he starts thinking a little bit too much about what he's doing.
I'd like him to think a bit more, though. I'd like him to think, read the situation, read the room, and say, actually, we know this is an important part today, which is pink ball, this unique game of cricket that I don't believe should be happening anyway, and just play Stark off. They did it during the summer against India, against Bumrah a couple of times, when they let Bumrah bowl 5 overs for nothing, saw him off, and then attack the other lads. Sometimes England don't learn. And
right, I would agree a little bit with the idea of seeing Stark off if he was trying a ramp shot or something like that. Okay, this was just a full ball outside off stump that was there to be smashed through the covers, right? And he obviously has nicked it. Okay, it wasn't obviously the way he's tried to he's tried to smash the ball, which hasn't helped him. And I think the dismissal probably looks a little bit worse than it potentially was. I think the ball was there to be hit. I just worry that I've seen so many England players over the years who have their natural attacking, talents curtailed by England. You don't need to look any further than like a Joss Butler. Absolutely ruined him in terms of Test cricket. Yeah. That guy is an absolute genius holding a cricket bat in his hand. And you watch him in Test cricket and he's just a completely different player. And I just, I'm more than happy with Brook. You go with it and you let his talent shine through.
I think we have to agree to disagree. Bring me back Nathan Hussain and John Corley at 3 and 5. We'll win some Test matches.
Yeah, you'd have Rory Burns opening still, but
better average than Zach Corley.
Mm-hmm. So that's a bit of cricket. I think the thing about it's just disappointing. I think for England to have such a poor day. In a whole world of trouble now. I think obviously you have to try and pick up those 4 remaining wickets quickly in the morning, and in many respects they're almost going to have to Bazball it, to get themselves back into this game in a hurry. It's going to take some effort in the second innings, and honestly, it just doesn't feel very likely at the moment.
There's still a lot of cricket left in this game, but they need a good day tomorrow. If they had a bad day today, they need a much better day tomorrow.
Right. Let's talk about this weekend's Premier League football. Obviously, there's only one place to start, and that's the title clash between Arsenal and Aston Villa.
The title clash.
Villa Park. Obviously, Arsenal 6 points clear of Villa. Villa play Arsenal twice this month, so we could see that lead disappear pretty quickly. All jokes aside, it's going to be a fascinating game. It's a bit of a shame it's the early kickoff on Saturday. Villa have an amazing home record, really, in the last 18 months. I think they've only lost to Crystal Palace in the last 30-odd home games. They played the likes of Paris Saint-Germain, Man City, everyone in that time. The last defeat before Palace was Arsenal last year. It's a game I remember well. I remember feeling somewhat hard done by as Ollie Watkins had possibly the miss of the season, where he basically missed an open goal. Ended up being a great save by Raya, but shouldn't have got anywhere near it. Watkins missed another one-on-one as well, and Arsenal took one of their chances relatively late on. Villa are incredibly competitive against anyone at home, and I think this is going to be a tough test for Arsenal. I think team news will be big, so whether that be Martinez for Villa, whether he's fit or not, and also for Arsenal as to whether Declan Rice will be available or not.
Yeah, sure. Going back to the Aston Villa, it'd be interesting to see what they do in midfield. Whether they keep Kamara and Onana, I personally would. I think you need the physicality in there against the Arsenal, especially if Declan Rice plays. I'd probably play Rodgers off the left. I'd be tempted to play Tillmans in that 10 and play McGinn off the right and play a narrow midfield there kind of thing. Arsenal don't have Rice. That changes the dynamic game a lot. I don't know what they would do without him. He probably is going to be fit, but he's not going to be 100% fit the way he was walking off in the tunnel on Wednesday night. They're not going to play Odegaard and Eze and Zubimendi in that midfield. They get absolutely bullied, in my opinion. It just wouldn't work. I'd imagine they played Norgard if Declan Rice doesn't play.
Well,
yeah,
I think
the 12:30 game I don't like, especially a big game like that. I think the lack of atmosphere, it probably helps Arsenal more that it's a 12:30 game with not the home crowd being around later in the evening when it's under lights. I don't know how much that has factored in. Yeah. If Arsenal win, it's massive. If Arsenal lose and Man City go on to win, then it's tighter on. But yeah.
I think that midfield battle will be like really interesting because obviously Onana and Kamara played against Brighton for Villa. Villa have tried to play Tielemans slightly further forward ahead of them. Hasn't worked as well as you think it would. So I think Villa might be a bit reluctant to do that. I think it'd be a bit tough on Buendia, who's actually played pretty well recently. McGinn has to start even off the right hand side. He is the absolute heartbeat of this team. You were talking about leaders earlier and lack of them at Chelsea. McGinn is the absolute focal point in terms of leadership for this team. I think the midfield battle will be big, and if Rice is missing, that will be huge. I think it's just going to be a really interesting test of where Arsenal are at. If they win this game, then it puts them in unbelievable shape in terms of winning the title. And a loss here, a Man City win, and that big lead Arsenal had built up at one stage would be down to 2 points, which would be game on.
Yeah, I think it's just keeping that word and sport momentum going in, but that confidence. If they lose tomorrow, a couple of results could go either way, against them, and then suddenly you're not even leading in the league. So, a red card here or there, or dodgy refereeing decision here or there. Yeah, it's a game of the weekend. The other Premier League games, it's not really a standout game. You've obviously got Tottenham. Frank needs to win. Liverpool away at Leeds on Saturday night. A Liverpool fan not confident going to Leeds is saying something. Bournemouth Chelsea is an interesting one.
So I think the Bournemouth one's interesting in as much as Bournemouth were terrible against Everton in midweek. They looked absolutely lost in terms of trying to be creative. They created virtually nothing. When teams sit back against Bournemouth, they really struggle. They didn't know whether they didn't know how they wanted to break Everton down. They ended up going quite long at times, and you're never going to have much success against Everton, I don't think, going long. What you actually saw was you might be struggling for Liverpool, but I think you saw how much Bournemouth missed someone like a Kirkes bombing on down the left-hand side in that type of game. But Chelsea obviously were poor away at Leeds. Can Bournemouth replicate what Leeds did? And I think they may well have a bit of success. Chelsea will try and play out the back, and Bournemouth will press them. And if they can get turnovers in good positions, they could cause Chelsea a few problems. And we've touched on Caicedo missing. Feels like a big game for Chelsea and Maresca. They wouldn't want to have back-to-back defeats, I don't think, against two struggling teams.
Yeah, I think it's an easier. It sounds silly. I think it might be an easy game for Bournemouth to be set up for against Chelsea. He'll give them a chance, as you say, in transition, compared to Everton, who went there as a low block, who tried to attack them on the counter-attack and take their chance. So, yeah, I think actually for Bournemouth, it's probably an easy game to set up for and have a chance of getting a win. And you say it'd be interesting to see what Chelsea do in that midfield. Does Santos play again? I'd imagine Reece James comes back into midfield and plays. You can't read Chelsea. We talked about it earlier. You can't predict their team either. It'll be. Does Palmer start?
Well, I would be amazed if you don't have Gusto at right back. You have James in the middle. It's just a question of whether James plays with Fernandes or Santos. I actually don't mind Santos. He's obviously only young. He's certainly growing on me. He's played a little bit in recent weeks. There's a player of sorts there. Still obviously not anywhere near, in terms of replacement level from Caicedo. But there is something there. And I think the challenge Maresca is going to have in the coming weeks is getting the balance of that front four correct. In terms of, as you say, where Fernandes fits in, where where Neto fits in. You're going to go to Lap. Will Palmer play in the middle? Will he play off the right? There's a lot of decisions there for him to make. So it'll be interesting to see. I think one of the most interesting games tactically this weekend will be Tottenham-Brentford. And the reason I say that is obviously you have Thomas Frank and you have Keith Andrews, who was obviously his assistant, or one of his assistants.
Set piece coach, wasn't he?
Set piece coach. But I think that both will know each other's strengths inside out in terms of how you have success against the Frank team and things like that. And it's going to be interesting to see how that sort of transpires, whether one of them does something that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I'm intrigued by that particular matchup.
Yeah, Thiago back playing will be a massive Brentford in midweek. He could have some fun against the Tottenham back line if they're not on it. I'd imagine Van der Ven back playing with Romero, so that's full strength back for Tottenham back there. But yeah, if they get an early goal, what the crowd going to be like, as you discussed earlier, kind of thing. It's not only both managers know their strengths, they'll also know the weaknesses, which is the biggest point. They'll know where to target and who to target as well. It'll be, pity it's not a UK team, but yeah.
So the final one I would say is I'm intrigued to see how Palace get on. They're looking absolutely exhausted at the moment. They don't have a deep squad. They've got a horrendous fixture list coming up that will expose that further. I think they were pretty fortunate to get that win in midweek. I think it could be a long few weeks for Palace. Other sport. Are you anything further on football, James?
No, not really. There's nothing much going on apart from Premier League.
Let's quick look at golf. So Aussie Open continues. Rory hasn't set the world on fire yet. I think he's 7 back at the halfway stage, so it looks pretty unlikely. It was interesting to see Cam Smith have a 66 today, so he's not miles back of the leaders. Adam Scott's up there, but not the most inspiring of tournaments, particularly given the time zones for us. Nedbank, Hovland, when I looked earlier, was quite a few back, 6 back, I think, this morning. And then in Albany in the Bahamas, Scotty Scheffler's tied for the lead. Another Scheffler win, which wouldn't be any great surprise. Formula One, James, obviously a massive weekend. Talk me through it.
So, race time is 1 o'clock GMT on Sunday afternoon from Abu Dhabi. Lando Norris needs a top 3 to guarantee his first world title. It would be one of the all-time biggest chokes, bottle jobs, whatever you want to call it, if Ease and McLaren don't win the championship on Sunday. The way they've messed up, qualified, and last weekend where they had a huge with the safety car, But all Lando has to do, as we sit here not driving at 200 miles an hour with pressure on, is follow Verstappen. If Verstappen makes a pit stop, you follow him in. You don't need to do anything different to what Red Bull do. The danger, obviously, is a safety car and his car breaking down. But yeah, it'll be a race I'll be watching. Sunday lunch will be postponed till later in the afternoon to watch that on Sunday afternoon. I don't normally watch a lot of Formula One, but it's got a bit repetitive. But a three-way title fight in the last weekend would be interesting. As discussed, would they have a three-way crash at the first corner?
Well, we'll wait and see.
And also, a big thing to look out for is, will McLaren keep their in-house rules of keeping the same strategy for both him and Piastri, or will they go, actually, we need to do something different here if Verstappen is looking likely to win the title? They will have to, surely.
I think they have to. I think looking at the market's quite interesting for me because they do give you an idea. But if Verstappen does get punchy, and he's very capable of doing that,
getting his elbows out, yeah.
Piastri becomes quite an interesting runner, I think, at double figures. Just because if Lando doesn't finish, Piastri just has to win the race to win the title. Effectively.
Yep.
So
and Lando's not a great starter as well. His starts recently.
It's definitely not beyond the realms of possibility, but it'll be interesting to see. We have a bit of NFL action just quickly this weekend. We have Steelers at the Ravens. Ravens obviously need to win to keep the playoff hopes alive. Be interesting to see if the real Lamar Jackson turns up. He needs to.
He's been hiding recently.
Injuries, James. We've got Bengals at the Bills. I think the Bengals with Burrow back, they can be a threat to any team. Buffalo have been a little bit hit and miss at times this year. Again, you've got a team in terms of playoff. Buffalo need a convincing performance. We've got Bears at Green Bay. Bears have been sneaky competitive in recent weeks, as have Green Bay, to be fair. And I guess it feels like a lot will depend on how that Green Bay defense gets on against Williams. Probably the pick of the games is Texans against Kansas City. Mahomes needs to turn up, and if Kansas are going to make the playoffs, this is a tricky game against a good defense. I mean, you always back Mahomes to come through these types of situations, but it's tough to keep on doing. And then the other game late on Monday evening is Eagles against Chargers. Eagles have not looked great, but there is one issue with Herbert for the Chargers. He obviously broke his hand last week. It's a non-throwing hand, but he still had an operation this week, just to see how that affects what he does. So I think there's a few playoff consequences this weekend. So it's going to be interesting as always. I look forward to watching it as ever on Sunday evening.
Yep, be a couple of decent games. That Kansas game, especially against the Texans, is they have to win there, the Chiefs.
And any other sports, James?
A couple of things. Mosconi Cup's continuing. Europe are still leading that. Day 3 tonight from Ali Pali in London. Always good to watch. There's been a bit of needle in the last couple of days going on between the players and the fans. Always quite good, entertaining, even without Earl of Pearl stricken around. Jason Straw seems to be the pantomime villain for the Americans at the moment, which is always good and entertaining. Always do like the commentators on Sky apologising every 2 or 3 seconds for the language. So after 9 o'clock, get on with it. Allow it to happen. Anyway, couple of beers watching that this evening, maybe. Sandown horse racing tomorrow. There's a couple of good races. The Tingle Creek, the 2-mile chase is on. You have Ile Tom from the Mullins Yard Town and Board from Ireland coming over to run head of the market against Low de Sud, and my favourite horse after Constitutional Hill, John Bon running as well. No, thank you. You also have a novice Group 1, Lulamba from the Henderson de Boinville yard earlier on in the card as well. And in Ireland on Sunday, you have a good race in Cork, 250. The 2 mile race Marlborough is running up against Ergamine, Banbridge, and a couple others. Yeah, so there's a couple of decent races. It's all leading up to the Christmas racing at Kempton and over in Ireland.
There isn't a horse you've mentioned more to me on messages than John Bon. I'm just amazed that John Bon's still racing, to be honest, the way you keep saying he's been finished for about 6 years.
You won't be winning tomorrow.
I think that's everything. Thank you very much, as always. A fun weekend of sport. Hopefully, I don't have to go to the Christmas fair tomorrow and I can actually watch Villa Arsenal. But there you go.
Things you got to
do. We'll catch up on Monday. Have a fun weekend.
Yeah, cheers all. Have a good weekend.